Hello, ladies and gentlemen, and everything in between. Welcome back to What's on the Playlist today. Today, I want to talk about the album Rage Against the Machine by the band Rage Against the Machine, an image of which you'll see here. Hard to believe this album came out in 1992. Damn, that was a long time ago. Um, this is the debut album of Rage Against the Machine. It was basically they re-recorded basically their demo tape that they'd sent in to like various music studios to try and get an album. Of the 11 songs in the demo tape, 7 of them made it into this album. Some of the other songs were cut. Some of the other songs have been made into other albums. There was at least one song from the demo tape that was put into the Crow movie, starring Brandon Lee. This album is heavily political themed. It was released to a lot of critical acclaim. There was some guy who put it on his list of 1001 albums you should listen to before you die. Another thing that makes this album different is that it really it blends musical styles. It is definitely a mix of heavy metal, funk music, and rap. And those aren't usually my styles of music, and I seem to be doing a lot of those reviews lately. And I think what really made this album stand out for me, and what made me really gravitate towards it more than other rap and hip hop music, is that there's actually actual musicians. That may be a bit snobbish of me, but that is one of the things that kind of drives me away from a lot of rap and hip hop, in that they're using music synthesizers. There's no real actual musicians. Not to dismiss the talents of the songwriters and the performers, but at heart, I love the guitar, and Rage Against the Machine has some heavy guitar work. This stuff has some power to it, and as the name suggests, there's a lot of rage in this music too. And while that doesn't seem to really fit my persona of being a laid back ex old hippie, yeah, I can feel the rage in these songs. I can feel the anger, the frustration, and the contempt that these guys felt and still feel to this day. The establishment. These guys are very much anti-establishment, which, does resonate with the hippie core of me. They also seem to have a bit of a sense of humor. In the liner notes, where it usually says things like, all songs are written by, they basically list themselves as guilty parties. I like that. That made me chuckle. Another thing fits in with the band's theme. On the inside of the album, it basically says, "You are being lied to." And on the front page, somewhere in here, there's like a little political piece here. I'm not sure what it was written by. I couldn't find it in the liner notes where this came from. But it talks about mass media being used to, manipulate us and things of that nature. These guys have been very outspoken against the current political establishment, both for this president's current presidency and his previous one. Although they also speak a lot against politics, corporate greed, control, and this is one of those bands that I wasn't really aware of when they came out. I mean, I'd heard that. I stopped listening to the radio a long time ago, so I was aware that they existed because I did occasionally hear radio at work. I did occasionally watch television, but these guys were just on my periphery, and that I knew they existed, and that was pretty much it. Didn't know anything about their music for really years, until I happened to, actually hear the song "Killing in the Name of" and actually sit down and, I was kind of critical about the song because it's lyrically very simple. There's really only about eight lines to it that are just even if it's, I don't even if there's actually that many lines to it, but he's just repeating the same verse over and over again. So that's not always a bad thing. There are other bands that have very simplistic lyrics. The Ramones, the Cranberries, very successful bands, both bands that I like. But, you know, just the raw emotion behind that song and that killer bass beat just really pulled me in and made me want to buy the album. And I did, and I really do like the album as a whole. I will, again, being critical, there is a repetitive feel to the music. Not 100%, but I recognize like the same guitar riff in multiple songs. And again, that's not always a bad thing. A lot of bands have a signature sound, and these guys definitely have that. But for me, it's like, because this isn't generally my style of music, I picked out that repetition a bit quicker. You know, if it was a band that again fit my usual tastes, you know, the stuff that normally hooks me in, I'm a bit more forgiving. And I admit that freely. We all have our biases. Another thing that made this album stand out for a lot of people, especially at the time, this was controversial, is that the picture on the cover is a famous photograph of a Buddhist monk immolating himself in public as a protest against the treatment of other Buddhist monks. I think it was related to a killing. I'm sorry, I should be better educated on this, because this happened during my childhood. I was alive when this thing happened, so I remember it happening, but I don't remember the details anymore. And I did look up the Buddhist name, but I would mispronounce it badly, so I'm not going to try. And given the anti-political message of the band itself and the band members, showing something like this, you know, someone doing this to themselves in protest, does again fit the band's general contempt of the political establishment and the business establishment of this country. I can't say this music is for everyone. There's a lot of anger here, and seeing comments from the band recently, you know, regarding certain things going on, their rage is still still present. Their band's not together anymore. They've broken up and reformed a couple of times, but I think currently they're still apart. And you know, this album came out over 30 years ago, so they're not in their 20s anymore. Touring in your 50s is a lot different than touring in your 20s. And sustaining that kind of energy takes a toll, man. But I really did like this album. What made me think of doing it is the current political environment. I'm sure I've spoken about my political leanings in the past, and I am very much anti-establishment. I always have been, which is what made the band resonate with me so much. Not just the killer bass riff. I do recommend, other people have recommended that you should listen to this album before you die. If nothing else, listen to Killing in the Name Of if you haven't. Very simple, not a long song, but the message behind it and the anger behind it is valid. I freely admit that. So, that's my crappy review and recommendation for this album. As always, thanks for watching. As always, my stuff is crap. And until next time, good hunting.